Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to another episode of A Win is a Win podcast. I'm your host, Edgar Chaput. This is the midweek episode. We are on the eve of week 2. The Buffalo Bills will be in Miami to face the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. The first time this year that we'll hear a little bit of Al Michaels on Amazon's broadcast. That being said, I figured a last minute in this case, but a recap of week 1, and I guess from a particular angle, from a special angle. There were some things that I would describe as you can't do that. So this is a new segment. I'm not promising it will return. It might. It's a long season. We got 18 weeks to go through and the playoffs. But I'm calling this segment You Can't Do That. I had 3 come to mind. Let's discuss. And these 3 incidents are quite different in nature. One is a coaching decision, one is a matter of overall team performance and team preparedness, and another is an individual mistake. But in each instance, each example, I feel, exemplifies things that you can't do. You can't. That's why I'm calling it. You can't do that. Not at this level. Not in the NFL. Not under those circumstances, and not with the time you had to prepare, literally all summer, for week 1. The first that comes to mind. This is the individual moment, and it is the interception that Tennessee Titans quarterback Will Levis tossed inexplicably in the fourth quarter as they were trying to hold on to a lead versus the Chicago Bears. This happens at 7:35 of the final frame. 7:35 of the final frame, forgive me, with the Titans up 17-16. Keep in mind, Tennessee had led 17-0. The Tennessee defense, led by Amani Hooker, had done a fine job limiting whatever Caleb Williams could inflict on them. Caleb Williams, obviously the number 1 overall draft pick, but they made him look rather mediocre. It was quite a pedestrian debut for young Williams as quarterback of the Chicago Bears. But they found a way to claw, no pun intended, their way back into the match. They scored 16 straight points. And with 7:35 left in the game, a 1-point lead, basically, Will Levis starts feeling the pressure, rolls out of the pocket to his left, and as he is getting tackled to the ground, decides to arm flick the ball to the sideline. Was he trying to flick the ball out of bounds to avoid a sack? Was he trying to flick it to a Titan receiver who was in the vicinity? Maybe, either or. It doesn't really matter because Chicago Bears' Tyreek Stevenson happily received the ball and charged 43 yards down the other way. 6 more points for the Bears, 22-17, and Caleb Williams did pass to DeAndre Swift for a 2-point conversion. So I guess technically Williams did throw a pass that resulted in a score, albeit a 2-point conversion and not a touchdown. You can't do that. I know Will Levis is young. He's 25 years old. He's an old sophomore. Usually by your 25th year, you're rarely in your second season in the NFL, but he is only 25 years old. It's only his second season in the NFL, and he appeared on the NFL landscape midway through 2023. So it's not like he's completed a full season. In fact, week 1 in Chicago was only his 10th start. So I don't want to badmouth him too much. I don't want to poo-poo him too much. But even as a young stud, as maybe a good quarterback, I think it's too early to tell. In that situation, that kind of a scoreline, a 17-0 lead having vanished and devolved into a 17-16 lead, and you can feel the momentum shift, especially in the stadium, because most of the people in the stands are cheering against you and for the other guys. You can't do that. He'll learn from these mistakes. I hope he'll learn from this mistake, for his sake, for the Titans' sake, and the sake of that fan base. But that was a pretty dunderheaded move, even for a sophomore QB who was feeling the pressure. Chicago's defense was playing very well in the second half. Credit where credit is due. But it's the name of the segment. You can't do that. The second you can't do that of this very, very special episode was in Los Angeles as the Raiders visited the Chargers. This was another sort of low-scoring, mostly a close game. It was a little bit difficult to find out who was going to win as the game evolved. In fact, Las Vegas held a 7-6 halftime lead, which gives you a little indication of how that game was going. And the Raiders didn't take care of a lot of their opportunities. There was a critical fumble that turned the tide at one point in this game. That being said, in the fourth quarter, having already not gone for it once and opted to kick for a field goal, which went wide, down 16-10, in Chargers territory, mind you, not deep, but in Chargers territory nevertheless. It's also the last period. It's also halfway through that final period, more than halfway through that final period. On a 4th and 1, Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce opts to punt. The Chargers get the ball back, and as if ordained by fate to play a trick, or not to play a trick, I stand corrected, not to play a trick, to teach a lesson to Las Vegas, of course, the Chargers stroll down the field, in large part thanks to running back J.K. Dobbins, who busted off one particular great run. In fact, Dobbins was very, very good in the second half. If you want to point to one offensive player for LA in particular who really helped turn the tide, running back J.K. Dobbins, former Raven, he was quite good for the Chargers. But it almost felt ordained by the stars that even if the offensive performance that day, Las Vegas's offensive performance, I'm referring to, wasn't great, which it wasn't. Opening game of the season, it's not like Gardner Minshew has a fantastic record historically, so it was not a great day, but that's one of those moments that you have to take advantage of. If you don't make it on 4th and 1, so be it. So be it. But you're Antonio Pierce, head coach of the Raiders, and it felt like it was simply a very conservative decision. I know he's a defensive-minded coach. He demonstrated that enough last season. I mean, he was also a defensive player during his days on the gridiron. I understand that. I understand that overall the attack wasn't doing a whole lot. It was a little bit mediocre, to put it mildly, for the Raiders. But this is a rivalry game. You are in their territory, and you only need to get 1 yard to renew, to give more life to your chances of possibly marching down the field and scoring a touchdown. And even with the extra point, you have a 1-point lead. So to punt the ball away on a 4th and 1 with less than half of the fourth quarter left, and you're down a touchdown, and you're in the opposition zone, albeit not that deeply, you can't do that. The final "you can't do that" of this episode was down in Atlanta, Georgia, as the Pittsburgh Steelers, quarterbacked by Justin Fields, Russell Wilson had a calf soreness that kept him out of action, visited the Atlanta Falcons. One might say the new look Atlanta Falcons, given that Kirk Cousins came over from Minnesota during the offseason, and they have a new head coach in Raheem Morris. Now, it's not because they have a new head coach and a new quarterback that everything is hunky-dory in Atlanta. They weren't an especially good team last season. They weren't terrible, but they weren't especially good either. Kirk Cousins is a known entity. He has helped teams make the playoffs. He doesn't have a great playoff record. He also doesn't have a great track record in big regular season games against big opponents. He's notoriously average in primetime games. But still, he has had good seasons in the past. He has helped squads at least earn a postseason berth. And he did generally play a role on those teams. And Raheem Morris, he's not a dunderhead. He was the defensive coordinator for Sean McVay's Los Angeles Rams the past couple of seasons. And that defense has actually been pretty good. Well, the Falcons lost even worse than that. The Falcons lost 18-10 at home. The Steelers did not score an offensive touchdown. They kicked 6 field goals. Now, that's both good and bad. That means that Atlanta's defense played okay. They never broke, although they did bend quite a bit to give up 18 field goals, but 18 points via 6 field goals, although a couple of those field goals were from pretty far out. So I'm not saying you can't do that with respect to the Falcons defense. More so, you can't do that offensive output after an entire offseason of work, of practice, of lauding the arrival of Kirk Cousins, who, he's not a spring chicken anymore, and he did not finish his last season in Minnesota due to an injury that required surgery. I understand. I'm not saying the Falcons should have won this game 50-2. But to go 16 for 26 for 155 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, to be so anemic on offense, to be anemic despite the fact that you supposedly have a very good offensive crew. They have not 1 but 2 reportedly good running backs in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. They signed Ray McLeod III, who was formerly a San Francisco 49er. They have Kyle Pitts at tight end. They have Drake London as well. This is reportedly a solid group. Now, we haven't seen it come to fruition because the quarterback play last year was kind of mediocre. The quarterback play 2 seasons ago was kind of mediocre. So we haven't seen it come to fruition, really. In addition to the fact that Ray McLeod is just starting his career with the Falcons after being in San Francisco. And Bijan Robinson is a sophomore. He was only a rookie last season. A good rookie, though. So the word on the street that this is a good offensive crew, but to be unable to handle the Pittsburgh pass rush, to be unable to handle the Pittsburgh scheme against the run. And I understand TJ Watt is a great player. Of course he's a great player. A couple tackles for loss. He had a sack. He had a trio of QB hits. In fact, 2, not 1, 2 strip sacks, both of which were called back due to penalties on the play. Can you imagine that? That would have been a heck of a day. It already was a heck of a day for TJ Watt, but it could have been even better had his teammates not committed errors, penalty-worthy errors on those 2 plays. But you can't do that, Atlanta Falcons. You can't roll out a supposedly much better offense and put up 10 points and look so freaking hapless against Pittsburgh's defensive scheme. Yes, I understand that there are wrinkles to work out in week 1. That's understandable. I understand that Kirk Cousins is coming off an injury. Also understandable. But that was a low-level performance. That was cheap. That was the antithesis to anything that would get Falcons faithful excited for the rest of 2024. And now they have to go on the road, and they're not a very good road team. The Falcons will next be playing, I believe it's the Philadelphia Eagles. Yes, it is the Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, and it's on Monday Night Football. What was I saying about Kirk Cousins not being a good quarterback in prime time? Hey, maybe they win on Monday night. Maybe they win. It's not impossible. The Eagles are not impervious to losing. We saw that last year. They almost lost in Brazil last week. But not looking good. And that was a very, very sad offensive performance. Falcons, you can't do that. And there you have it. That was another episode of A Win is a Win podcast. I have been your host, Edgar Shapiro. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe a new course of action for the show going forward. I'm noticing that most of the listens I get, in fact, it's not even really all that close, are on YouTube. The numbers aren't great, but for what they are, about 90% of them are coming from YouTube. So I'm just going to say, check this out on YouTube, hit subscribe, smash that like button. If somehow you're listening to this and you don't know where I am, well, you are already on the Edgar Chaput 1793 YouTube channel, or you could just search for Edgar A Win is a Win podcast. You should search it. I don't understand why you would know that, since you're already listening to the show. And henceforth, unless plans change, this is probably the only place I'm going to put up the podcast. The numbers they're just not good enough on Spotify and Amazon Music for podcasters and Apple Podcasts. They're so small. I'd say about 80 to 90% of the listens I get right here on YouTube. So we'll continue that for the foreseeable future. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.